Hello. In this presentation we're going to be looking at using web fonts for your WordPress sites. Now, once upon a time you could specify any font you like on your website, but the catch was that if the person viewing it didn't have that font loaded on their computer, they couldn't see the font and it just went back to their default standard font. So in effect there was only really a few fonts you could use, and Arial and Helvetica and Times Roman were the ones that you remembered the most. So they added the technology so you could download fonts from sites and put them in your website, but compatibility issues between different browsers meant that you might not just have to have one type of font style, but you'd have to have 3 or 4 different file formats of the same font, if you could get hold of them, to work on different devices and different browsers. So that really wasn't a good either. But now we have a technology called web fonts. These are fonts hosted on the web by main internet providers, although you can do it yourself, and you specify which font you want on that host, and the browser goes and fetches the font for you, and the font is then attached to the style sheet, which determines what things look like, and everything on your page looks fantastic. So web fonts look much better than the system fonts, the default fonts of the internet. There is enormous choice. They also scale better, so larger fonts look as good a quality as the smaller ones. They don't have this blocky idea of looking blocky, looking like they've been stretched beyond their means. Now the main two players in this are, well, Google Web Fonts to start with, and these are free, easy to use, and there's a great range from Google. Adobe Typekit is probably the next most important one, although if you don't have an Adobe Cloud subscription or a subscription to Adobe, or the designer of your website doesn't, then you probably don't have access to the font selection there. There's also a major player called fonts.com, which has some free fonts with a banner on your website, and quite good cheap prices for sites, smaller sites, as in smaller traffic sites. So what do I suggest? Well, I suggest that you have a look at these fonts, you have a look at the web fonts, either Google or Adobe or somebody else. Please don't use too many styles though. Don't get carried away, because too many font styles reduces readability. It's a rule that's been set down for years. It applies to newspapers and magazines just as much as it applies to the internet. So what I suggest is maybe you have one font for your heading styles, hopefully similar to any logo font that you use. It can be large, elegant, ornate even. You might have a bold or a heavy font. In other words, that's an extra bold version of the same thing. And then you have a second font for normal paragraphs and other smaller text. And this one you want to be clean and easy to read because it's going to be smaller. And again, you might have bold and normal typefaces, but also you might have a light typeface which is less bold than normal. But please remember, each font takes up space to be defined. They can be quite a few 100K if you get carried away, so be careful of the total size of your web font files that you use. So we're going to flip over to a live demonstration of some Google Fonts and Adobe Typekit usage, give you an idea of what it all means. Right, well, I have actually set up 2 sites, one with each set of fonts, to show you the differences between the two. This first one is WP Fonts, or WP Google Fonts, which I downloaded from the plugin directory. And this one's probably the easiest to explain. So we've installed the plugin, activated it, and we can now choose from the long list of fonts available from Google. And we'll have a look at how you can choose them in a second, but let's start with how this works. So you choose the font. It might be available in multiple font weights. Of course, I'm not now going to be able to choose one. There we are. And you can see the different font weights turning up then. So we can choose which font weight we want, which is normal, bold, or whatever. And then we assign that font to a particular style. So it may be all the body tags, all the main tags. It might be the paragraph tags. You might want to use it for the headings. And then once you've got that one, you can save that. And you can go down and choose your next font and apply that to whatever else that's going to apply to. Bearing in mind, as I said, that you really don't want to use too many. There are 5, 6 different fonts you can add. I would suggest you wouldn't want to go that far, except of course that you might want to use the normal and bold version of a particular font. So you may want to choose a font here and then use its normal version and then use its bold version lower down, but we're a bit blind because we're not looking at the Google Fonts plugin. We'll have a look at that in a section in a moment. So that's how that font works. That is probably the easiest of the two plugins because it's pretty straightforward. That one's a bit more interesting. So this is Easy WP Fonts. I've installed it. You have to set up the API, which means you probably need somebody to help you with setting up a password, effectively a developer's password with Google, so that you can use their programming interface to grab the fonts. And if that sounds a bit of a headache, it might put you off and you might want to use WP Fonts. But if you can get over that, and you only have to do that once you set it up, you end up in the Customize section where you customize your website, and you'll see there's a new section called Topography. Now, if I pull down this, I can choose Edit. I'm now going to change the paragraphs in my site, and I'm going to use standard web fonts, you see, Google serif fonts, so I can use that one. And look, on the right hand side, the whole thing has changed. Live. And again, actually I think I like that better. That's nice and readable. Now for this is the headline H1 tag here. Yeah, so I want to make that a little bit more impressive. So we'll scroll down. What should we make that one? Well, let's choose that font. See the change? Not only that, I can say, well, actually, I want it. Oh, why do I have to choose one that's not? Oh, that's no, kind of that. It's not readable. There we are. I love that font. Okay, and what do I want it? I want to be underlined, yeah, and I want it to be all capitalized. Now, what you could do, you see, is you could say, well, that's Miranda 1. So what you could do is you could use that Miranda 1 again. There it is. Use that Miranda 1 font a second time, you see. But this time I'll just have it normal. I won't change the case, but it's still the same font, you see. So we're keeping the style. So that's how that works. And once you've hit save and publish, that is now live. And as long as your theme doesn't break it, which it shouldn't do, that will now be See the heading? That's H1, H1, H2, and our normal characters have changed. See the difference between that font and this? They're just so much nicer. And simple change like that makes such a difference to a site. So I really do recommend you have a look at this and you either do it yourself or have your web designer come back and sort out a nice, cool web font. As I said, if you can use the biggest font to be similar to any font you're using in your logo, that will make the site look more connected as well. If you have a completely different font for your logo than your headings, it does look a little disjointed. So if you can have the two similar, if not identical, it works really well. So, where do we find these Google fonts? Well, we're on google.com/fonts, and that will bring you to a page very similar to this. And I'm shown here there are 700 font families available. And obviously looking through 700 font families is going to be quite a job. So we don't really want to do that. We want to be a bit more interesting like that. So this is our example text to look at. We can see how it looks. Now we can start choosing what we want. Monospace is if they're all spread out. We don't want those. We don't want a handwriting one, that would be a bit too over the top. Display. Let's look for a serif, so a slightly more ornate one. And this is going to be a heading, so let's have it a bit bigger so you can see what it looks like big. Let's have it 36. And what do we want? Well, we want one that's nice and thick. And can we have something with a small slant to it? No. Did you see what it said there? Yes, well, we'll keep quiet about what it says there. There we are. So there's a nice font for a heading. Alright, maybe we want it straight. So you can choose which font you want. You can add to your collection, and that will give you a number of fonts, so I can add that to my collection. And then I can go and find another font to go with it. Maybe I want a sans serif font, a more simple font for my smaller text. Sans serif effectively means no twiddly bits. That's the very crude translation. I'll make it a bit bigger for the video. So we can find a nice, easier font. We don't want it to be thick. We want it to be normal text. You see how much more readable that is? That's readable at that small size. It's also readable at that size. It's just a nice looking font, so I'll have that one. Now, this is Lato. I've used this one before. There's actually 10 stars by this chap, working very hard, producing nice fonts. So there we are. See, that's now added to our font family. So we're collecting the fonts together. The reason we can do that is some other products we need to give all the details to, but our plugins we don't, so that's quite neat. I would like to show you though, if you don't mind, if you bear with me, I would like to show you what Adobe does, because Adobe does it in a slightly different way. So this is Adobe Typekit, and if you have the budget to use this, or you have a developer who can make these available for you, these are just wonderful. We can choose what style we want, so let's have an impressive looking font to start with. Okay, we can have our example text. And we can choose fonts available for the web. We can have fonts that are available for download, for use in applications as well. Got lots of different styles here. We can have the font weights, something that will bold up the width of the characters, the contrast of the letters, and gradually your choice of fonts will decrease, and then you find out which one you want, and you can purchase them, or on my Adobe Cloud subscription I'm actually allowed to use a certain number of these within my subscription with Adobe Cloud, so I can choose some nice fonts and they then get installed with a code, so it can work very in a similar way to the Google fonts. And the other one that's quite good is well, very good, is fonts.com. Fonts.com, I'll just show you the pricing plan to start with, because to give you an idea of basic, you only allowed 25,000 page views over 30 days. So for a small site, that's not going to be a problem. You have to put a badge in. If you don't want the badge, you pay £4 a month. That's probably what, about $6. So it's not expensive. And again, you have a chance to have a look at some new releases, and there are some quite amazing fonts in here as well. You see this one's available as different styles as well. So it's absolutely fantastic time playing around with your fonts, and it makes a very big difference to your site, so well worth play. And of course, once they're set up, that's it, it's all done, works. So the two plugins we've looked at, the first one was Easy Google Fonts, over 100,000 installs, and that one is free from the WordPress downloads. And the other one was WP Google Fonts, again over 100,000 installs, and again free from the WordPress Plugins downloads. So thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your fonts.